Hi everyone. Welcome to a JCN Live. We are diving into our SIBO month with surprise, a live about SIBO. Mickayla's joining me today and we're going to be talking about food, specifically how we can use food in a therapeutic manner for SIBO. And one of the things that I want to go over that I think isn't talked about enough is how we can use food to diversify the diet in ways that people don't realise they can be diversifying the diet with conditions like SIBO. So let me see if I can find the lovely Mickayla. Oh, Melly! Hi, Melly. And we can get started. She is apparently coming down with the old scratchy throat. I don't know what that means, if she's going to go down hardcore. Fingers crossed these days, right? It's either the dreaded COVID or influenza. I can hear you, see a black screen, and there you are. How are you feeling?
A bit warm. I really hope I'm not getting sick, but I think that's what's happening because I've got like a swollen lymph node up here too.
Oh, the temperature's rising, trying to like boot it out of your body.
A little bit, yeah. I'm hoping I can just drown it with water and it'll go away.
Do you have any of your liquid herbs at home?
Yeah, you should have seen the shot that I gave Sam before. It was like completely full of herbs. I just gave him like a massive dose. I'm like, hope that helps. I'm gonna do the same thing too.
The mega dosages.
Yeah. Acute dosing.
Acute dosing. I like it. So we're talking about eating tips for SIBO, which is, a big topic. But I was saying I want us to definitely talk about how we use diet in a therapeutic manner, as far as there's some, I think, maybe some people watching, some common things that they may be doing or have heard about. But I actually wanted us to spend some time talking about foods as far as what else people can be consuming, because we see this heaps at JCN, right, where people have a limited amount of food in their diet when they could be including more, and that's often down to understanding other produce, ingredients, and just how to put things together.
Well, like even exposure though, like some people just eat the same kind of foods every week and don't even look down the other aisles of the grocery store to find these things. But just broadening that food intake a little bit with some fun stuff.
Yeah, that's so true, right? That's the habits that you get into where you just, and we see that heaps of clients. It's like, this is what I like, your kind of dietary recall on your dinners and your things. And it's like, these are the things I buy because this is just what I buy and I've always bought this. And it's like having that discussion about other veggies or different grains that you may not either have heard of, or you just never, you know what it is, but you just don't think about buying it because it's, you're like, what do I do with this weird thing?
Leave it in the cupboard.
Until it goes moldy, then you throw it out. I always joke with clients, there's like this 50%, it's like this first 50% of a new food, and then there's the last 50%, and the first is when they buy it and it makes it to the pantry or to the cupboard, but then that 50% often involves it sitting there for months or going moldy in the fridge. So it's like the next steps to actually use it. So I often say, I bought that, and then it kind of went moldy, and then I bought it again and I think it's still okay. So it's like the intention's there but it hasn't quite pushed over.
Yeah. I did this the other day. I tried a new food. You know how you can buy taro root as like a root vegetable?
Yeah.
I tried that first time the other day and I was actually quite happy with it. Like, it's very interesting flavour, very nutty. But like that's something I bring up a lot with people, is like if they do have that limited range of food, even just trying like one new vegetable that week just to broaden it out a bit. But with SIBO, obviously there's a little bit more to it than that.
I love that. How did you have the taro?
I just boiled it like it was in a soup. So kind of like how you cook potato.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was like,
Nice. Good on you.
yeah.
So I thought we'd talk first about why manipulating and changing up your diet for SIBO essentially helps, because it's something that we see all the time. I think, even social media shows that, and I know we use it as a therapeutic tool in clinic. But do you want to start by just, like, again, sort of smaller version, but like, why essentially do we change the diet as far as manipulating it and removing certain foods for a period of time to help with SIBO? What are we doing there?
Essentially, because SIBO is like an overgrowth of that large intestinal bacteria into the small intestine, it shouldn't necessarily be there, but eating a lot of those foods that are your typical prebiotics and like your starches and that sort of thing is progressing that overgrowth. So by taking them away, we're essentially starving those microbiomes so we can get that overgrowth back to a manageable level and prevent, like, it growing further and creating more of a problem.
Exactly.
Pretty much that as the short
Exactly.
version.
In a nutshell, that's what we're doing, which is the beauty of how we can manipulate the food as far as you just said, sort of starving off or reducing levels of those bacteria, which is one part of a treatment protocol. It's not all of it. However, very quickly to follow that up for us is why that's not a long-term solution, because as you just said, all of those fibers and prebiotics that feed the bacteria, that's something that we're avoiding because of the overgrowth. But if we are to do that long term as a solution, we're actually running into problems. Do you want to, I'll sort of come on the tail end of it. Do you want to explain a little bit about why we don't want to do that long term? Like what's the sort of implications of that? Because I think a lot of people are just like, well, I feel better, so I'm just going to eat like this.
Like, it is symptom relief because you're not feeding those microbes that are creating the problem, right? But in starving those microbes, you are also starving your beneficial microbiome and those bacteria that actually do good for you, which do also feed on similar things. They just don't create such a problem. So if you did this long term, you would not only be starving those bad bacteria that are causing the issue, but also the good microbiomes that produce, like, your short chain fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory. So yeah, definitely that modulation is needed to help get rid of the SIBO, but definitely not long term if you want to have that good, rounded, well-established microbiome that actually provides good health in the long run.
Exactly, which is why we get so passionate about that, because it's that long-term health. And I think it's easy to fall into that symptom control with the diet. If you feel better in the moment, you can kind of just push aside the long-term benefits, particularly when you're young. I think it's easier to do that, just to go, I'll worry about that later. But the other thing we see too is that the more you're in a restricted style of eating and not dealing with everything as far as the underlying causes, if you're just doing that with food restriction, then you're not, as Mickayla said, you're not really treating it, you're symptom controlling. And often what will happen is you actually start getting more reactive because of that limited dietary intake. Your body gets less used to seeing variety of food and variety of fibers. And also, if there's inflammation going on and all these different things that can come along with SIBO, if you haven't really dealt with that, you can still be having these heightened responses to food, like immune reactivity. And so those foods you're starting to eat every day that you feel fine with start reacting. So you might be like having your kind of limited diet and then you feel worse on that. So you go, oh God, that broccoli's not sitting well now. So now I'll cut that out. And now this isn't. And this is where we see people who will end up backed into a corner and they're eating limited foods. And sometimes that can be as little as like 5 to 10 ingredients, and that's it on rotation. And man, the implications of that from what you're saying as far as health, but like mental health, like, and lifestyle and quality of life, no good.
Like how many nutrients are you going to get from those 5 foods?
Yeah, that's it. And I always say that and like to include that. And I feel like sometimes maybe it sounds like I'm saying it to freak people out, but it's actually something that we see at the clinic a lot. And it's really like those clients that do come to you that are eating like 5 to 10 foods, the quality of life that they have is really, it is poor. Like they do really struggle as far as what they miss out on in life, and also their stress every day, because food's such a mission. Like everything is such a mission, let alone like the other like reactivities that start happening. So it's just, it is just something that we're so like cautious with and really want to get that message out about, is that it's not the long-term solution. It's a very important part of how we can initiate treatment, but it's ultimately it's helping reduce the numbers, but it's also on its own just symptom control. So we don't want to just do that.
Yeah. And I was actually listening to a SIBO podcast on the train home to get into the right mentality. But I can't remember who it was exactly. She was talking about SIBO and like that it's the most common like chronic condition that relapses.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because there is such an issue with having those foods and like that restriction that you need to do in that certain like period of time. But also if you are backed into a corner and you're only eating like 5 foods, eventually you're gonna go crazy and try and eat something else, and it's just gonna make it worse in that short term. But yeah, I just found that interesting.
Yeah, well, we just did was it the JCN Clinic podcast by any chance? The podcast we just did on Friday, Chris and I was on recurrent or recurring SIBO. And yeah, so true, right? Like there's this like just trying to use diet is like one of the reasons why you feel fine, and then you try and come off that and you get this flare up. So there's these like multitude of reasons why we can get these flare ups, and it's another kind of rabbit hole, but I think SIBO is considered a condition that is acceptable to be reoccurring. And I get that there can be multiple reasons, but as Chris and I talked about, there's often a lot of reasons that that's happening because of X, Y, Z. So if anyone's interested in that, go and listen to the podcast.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk about the foods that we mentioned as far as being overlooked, but also when we were chatting about this as a topic, I know you were saying sort of a little bit of interest in, I know I didn't put this in our list of things to chat about, but I'll just run it by you anyway. Just when it comes to foods and using the diet, you were talking about the hydrogen dominant SIBO versus the methane dominant SIBO, which is the two major components of SIBO that we test for here in Australia. We don't have the hydrogen sulfide yet, but you were kind of flagging about how the diet can change, like not a lot, but I think you were alluding to ways that we could maybe change up the diet a little bit there. But I don't know if that was something you wanted to talk about, or if it's, you know, if it sort of works in with today, but I just thought I'd put you on the spot and ask you.
You mean like diet, what would cause more symptoms between the two and differences there, or?
Yeah, maybe. I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but yeah, I think it was like as far as when we get test results and we get, say, someone that's more hydrogen dominant SIBO versus someone that was more methane dominant, that there might be certain foods that say that methane dominant person would be more reactive to, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just like imagining that's what you were thinking about. Because you know why I'm asking you, Mickey, is because when you were talking about it too, I was like, that's very interesting. Because I feel like as far as the classic methane overgrowth, there are maybe a little bit more reactivity to that allium family with the garlics and the onions, but I think it's minor, really minor. So I wasn't sure if you'd heard something or read something that was more specific. So I just thought I'd ask, but maybe not.
Not a whole lot. I think there's probably, it kind of depends, because you can have both growing, but one is just more dominant, but then you're still reacting to like those sulfur containing foods like your cruciferous vegetables and your garlic and your onion, but also like just starches as well, like I don't know, bread and pasta and potato maybe at a bad.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's more, and I feel like it's more something that the food and how the food is utilized with that either classic low FODMAP style or that biphasic diet style, which we'll talk about in some of the posts going up on the JCN site. Like, the food tends to be relatively similar no matter what, but then it's individualized more so by that individual and like how you are as a person and what you can handle, and how you respond. But it's the supplements that tend to change up as far as like what we would use with certain herbs and antimicrobials more so.
Yeah. Like, I think we've had it with a few clients actually, like where they have diagnosed SIBO overgrowth and some don't respond well to like the garlic compound or the allium compound as a fresh, like that's the wrong choice for them. But maybe the green herbs or something like that is more suited to overgrowth.
Yeah, yeah, which is really important again, like as far as this treatment process goes. I know we're deviating a little bit from food, but like, yeah, it's there's ways that you would use certain supplements to help with the SIBO that actually are kind of influenced by how you would think about how someone would eat and what they can eat. So yeah, if someone's reacting to certain things in their food really extensively, it's definitely going to influence how we think about what they would take as a supplement in those initial stages. So it's always kind of fascinating.
Yeah. What kind of foods you might be more strict on excluding at that time?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Maybe if they're meat dominant, you would be a lot more strict on those sulfur foods and like, no, don't include, broccoli and obviously cabbage. Maybe even eggs at that point in time. Whereas if they were like hydrogen dominated, you might be more focused on those foods that are starches and like the processed foods in general.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk a bit about the foods that we feel overlooked. This is more about what people could be having, which is the more exciting component. So if I know what we've talked about, we haven't really alluded to much to avoid. We've done that on purpose, but there will be some posts coming up. And of course, the reason we're not is because it should be individualized. But there are a lot of foods that we see that people don't include, that they could be including, that are worthwhile talking about on a broader scale. So I feel like the biggest one is good old pseudograins. I don't know whether you feel the same. I feel like there's quite a few different things, but yeah, what do you think pseudograins is up there?
Yes, in a way. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't know what pseudograins are and like how to include them in their diet as much. Like, I mean, buckwheat, clearly your favorite, but I don't think I personally cook with it a lot, but I did something that I, like a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have known what buckwheat was and I wouldn't know how to include it in my diet. So I probably would have just avoided it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, where it's not really like, there's a multitude of ways that you can actually eat it, and there's a lot of different grains that are a lot more accessible now.
Yeah.
Like teff and what's that one? Tiger nut is one that I've seen pop up last year
in
or so.
supermarket too, right?
Yeah. A lot more fun things. And like people have their own flavors as well, which is kind of fun to experiment in the kitchen with.
Yeah. And most of these, the good thing is now a lot of them are available in the supermarket, like depending on the size of it, but buckwheat flour, sometimes teff, definitely tiger nut flour. Chestnut flour is a favorite, but I find that's a little bit harder. Millet is definitely around more. And these are what we mean by pseudograins. They're kind of technically not a grain, but they act like a grain. But the cool thing is, it's about how you can substitute. So if you've got this going on and you're like, well, I want to have my bread or I want to have my pasta or I want to cook that recipe, there's just these swaps that we can be looking at using. And I think that's where it is getting familiar with these names. And then, as you said, Mickey, like just buying something new. Like, don't go and buy everything all at once because you'll just overwhelm yourself. But buy the buckwheat flour, like Mickey bought the taro, and just go, right, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm just going to try it making some pancakes with this, or I'm going to try, using it to coat some fish or something like that. and then start integrating it. I mean, obviously the internet's filled with recipes now too, so you can jump on there and look at it. But I just feel like the reason I could jump straight to pseudograins is that one of the areas with particularly SIBO that gets knocked is the carbohydrate, that complex carb intake and the amount of starches for a reason, because of the fiber, like you're saying right at the start. So if we can use alternatives to try and keep a bit of a backbone there, then that just helps so much with people's macro intake, their balance to a point, their satiety levels, and just them, again, their sort of emotional mental health through this. And I've definitely seen clients who have come along who have been following a more strict classic SIBO protocol, and even just manipulating, or not even manipulating is the wrong word, just changing their diet, right, to include more of these that are usually 95% of the time well tolerated. They feel so much better just with those in their diet as far as energy and bowel movement.
Yeah, and they're still bringing some of that fiber content to help with that. It's just not contributing in the same way. But like, I know you said buckwheat and like cooking with different flours in terms of coating stuff. But like, I feel like in that way that like buckwheat flour, for example, doesn't have a very strong taste, so it is easy to swap in, especially if you were doing like baked goods or something.
Mm-hmm.
But there is like a lot of other different flours and stuff, and most of those gluten-free flours, I was actually looking at it today, but the gluten-free flour mixes have a lot of extra starches and stuff as well, which may or may not be included in a SIBO diet as much. But then also just like swapping, if you normally have pasta or whatever, swapping for buckwheat pasta or quinoa instead of white rice, something like that. It can be really simple, like just literally a one-to-one swap.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what we try to do, don't we, with like helping people just take it's like, what's that framework now? How can we change this to work for you while still keeping enough diversity, but how do we need to manipulate it? And like, what different things are you going to bring in and try? But I think, one of the biggest thing here is encouraging people just to give it a go. And there seems to be a real fear. Like, I know there's an element of maybe wasting money, perhaps, but I think there's also more so a fear of like new things and the bit of fear of using them. But it's just, once you give it a go and you try something new, like it's just opens up this whole repertoire of what you can be doing. So, and I feel like I mean, there's so many. The other one for me, and I'm sure for yourself, is about like the flavor side of things. Like, classically when you're changing up a diet like this and you're pulling out the high FODMAPy things like garlics and onions and maybe dairy for cheese stuff, like it's people struggle with, how do I create flavor? What do I do here? So what are some of the things you like to tell clients as far as some of those things they might, I guess some of them we might think are obvious, but maybe some that people may not know what about?
I know we tell a lot of clients about like the flavored oils and stuff, but even just adding in different herbs that you wouldn't normally cook with and experimenting with flavor in other ways other than using onion and garlic, but things that would still bring a lot of flavor and a lot of medicinal benefit, even in those phytonutrients and that antimicrobial activity. What's a good example there? I don't know, like paprika or cumin, or even what do I normally put on when I do like roast potatoes or roast pumpkin or something? I'll put like cinnamon and nutmeg on the pumpkin, or maybe on some potatoes with sumac on them. Just like adding in different things to experiment with different flavors and making it more of like an adventure and a growing process rather than focusing on all the things that you have to avoid.
My God, I love that. I love what you just said. You know what? And even they might seem really simple, but to a lot of people, even those three things, like those two things you said there, a lot of people, I can guarantee you, would not have tried that. And the cool thing is, it's flavor, but as you just said, it's medicinal. They're getting like all these medicinal benefits, and it's just buying maybe 2 or 3. Like, so most people have never even bought sumac, or may not have
No,
even
not
made
really.
besides
That's the
cinnamon.
migraine.
Like, it's just, they're just little pearls of things that you can add in, and then it's just like this flavor explosion. As you said, it creates this positive, exciting new experience with the food, which I just
Mm.
love.
Yeah, and I
Pamela.
feel like some of these gluten-free grains and pseudograins that like would be native to very different cuisines kind of
Mm.
brings a little bit more variety in terms of like processes of cooking and the flavors that they come with in that. Um, that's more fun for me. Like I really like adding variety in terms of
Oh dear, you're freezing. We've got a, oh, there we go.
yeah. Did you get that?
I got the start of it right at the start.
I just said like different cuisines and different flavor palettes and everything that come with adding in those other like pseudo grains and different spices and stuff.
I get you, like trying a different like a different cultural cuisine, like going, I'm going to
Yeah.
try a Moroccan recipe, or I'm going to try something like this and
Yeah.
see what else it brings in. Like, I think of Moroccan because I think of, you put sumac in my head, those sorts of spices, but like preserved lemon and these different,
Mm.
or like even grating like the zest of lemons and oranges into dishes. Um,
Oh, it sounds good.
one of our favorite swaps, I just laugh because Pamela's put this up, was using fennel instead of onion. It's like a big one that we do at JCN that a lot of people don't realize, is that fennel as a vegetable is one, I reckon 1 out of 10 people that you ask would be lucky to get a yes that they've tried it. And most people will buy it or maybe had it thinly sliced in a salad. It's quite crunchy, got an aniseed flavor. But when you cut it up and you roast it, it's got a flavor similar to onion. So we always get our clients to use fennel instead of onion in recipes to get that oniony flavor, and it just works a treat. And it's, yeah, it's just another veggie. And fennel's, do you use fennel much as a herb? Not so much.
Not very often. Mainly with
Oh,
digestive stuff, like a bit of bloating and wind, but I would more
yeah,
use it as a tea in that case because it's not.
yeah,
It's much nicer as a tea. But like in terms
yeah,
of food,
yeah. Which
I
is, I
really
think, more about the seeds. Is that more about the
yeah,
seeds as
fennel seeds,
well than the
not the actual
vegetable?
root itself. Yeah,
Yeah,
but I don't like
for
fennel.
sure.
Maybe I should try it roasted
Yeah.
though, because I haven't had it that
Oh,
way.
try it roasted. It's like a different vegetable. Like, it's really weird. It's like all the aniseed flavor goes out of it and just becomes like this oniony flavor.
I'll try it. I can't guarantee that I'll like it, but I'll try it.
That's the attitude. That's what we want to hear. I know I'm waving my pen at you.
I'm in trouble.
I think the
Was there
only,
any
well, sorry.
Was there any other foods that you could think of that are like swaps in?
There's lots of there's lots of brand swaps and things we won't go into, but I think the only other one that is I see people not using as much would be the fruits, in the same way as some of the veggies. Like, there seems to be a real limitation on what you think you can do with fruits, but even just experimenting in the variety of different berries and buying different types of berries, whether they're even frozen, is fine. Pomegranate's a big one we use at JCN. Like, if you like the flavor of those, like whether it's I think fruit's around a bit more now, but you can buy the frozen little, what are they called? I don't know, whatever you call them. Little things, little pips. Like, I mentioned the citrus, with the zest of that being really great for flavour. And even if you can source it too, depending on where you are, cranberries, but like fresh cranberries, or not like, fresh, it might be like frozen fresh cranberries. There used to be
Yeah.
this Yeah, they're around, like all of those, because I think, again, when people think, oh, I can only have berries if they're on, depending on what sort of protocol they're being put on, it might be like blueberries. They just go blueberries all the time because they just buy wild blueberries because that's what they hear people talk about, where there's this whole like plethora of variety within that family. People could be having more. So I just think it's mainly that diversity that we're trying to really encourage people to have, is think about how, whether it's vegetables, fruits, complex carbohydrates, which are kind of that classic starchy family of carbohydrates, how can you continue to still expand and use different things in there? And just like, I just can't put it better than what you said before, like just try things, just like give it a go. Don't do it all, because we see that fall on its face all the time when people try and buy everything, but just like one or two. Yeah, just one new veggie. Like Mickayla's going to try fennel this week. And someone else, you know, like if you've listened and there's something you haven't tried before, just buy it and give it a roll, you know, like there's just a lot of options. And if you're not sure whether it's a yes or no, you can always, I mean, we don't know individual details, but you can always hit us up and ask us. There was an individual question just before we finish about pastry, which I kind of like, because this is something that I'm really big on, because I love baking and making these sorts of alternate recipes. So I've got a couple of pastry recipes on the website, and then there's one in the cookbook, which are a combo of these flours we've talked about, because you kind of need to use a combination to get them to stick. And then you usually need a binder, which can be psyllium if it's tolerated, or even slippery elm weirdly works like that. So something to just bind it, and then either egg in there if you can do eggs. What was that, Mickey?
I don't think there's very many like pre-made ones that would suit a SIBO diet.
You'd have to make it. You would have to make it, but it's pretty easy. Like the one that I do is just the flours. I do it like it's a Maggie beer recipe that I changed originally, where you just get the flours and you mix the flour with oil, and in a, like, sounds weird, but in a saucepan, like a roux, like a traditional, you know, when you do a white sauce and you do, so like that style. So you do a roux with that, and then you crack a couple of eggs in and you mix them around until it kind of creates like this sticky dough. That works amazing. And that one's definitely in the cookbook for the spanakopita. And then there's like a pied as well. And they are absolutely SIBO friendly. I think there might be one flour that's an easy swap to like buckwheat or something. The thing that's tricky is if you can't have egg, but usually that's where you need to use a bit more of the binder and put a bit of baking powder in there if you need the rise. So hopefully that helps with the pastry question. I just feel like there's always a way. I get obsessed with it, but I feel like there's always a way, like there's always a workaround, because I feel like in our Western culture of this is what we eat, here's our box. It's like if we take some of the box away, there's actually this whole arena of food. And so many people will say to us over the years, like, I'm eating more diverse now than I ever, like they're on a protocol with us. They're like, I'm eating more diverse food now than I've ever eaten in my life.
But then it's like, what's available near you as well. I find that really bizarre that they're like, if I went to the farmer's market, I can find a good solid, like maybe 5 to 10 different vegetables that I wouldn't find at Coles and Woolies. So the other thing about doing something that includes more variety in your diet, even if it's not a SIBO diet, is just going to different places as well to source those products.
Yeah.
Like a health food store is probably a good one for those flours and grains and stuff.
Yeah.
Or pseudograins. Yeah. But going to different places for your fruit and veggie as well.
Yeah.
There's much more
really good point. Or even online, because some people who are like rural or feel time poor, there's so much online now. I do it where I am. I don't have as much near me, so I just do an online order, and there's all the options that are there now.
Yeah.
It's just, again, just making that decision just to go, you know what, I'm just going to give this a go.
Yeah. Or those fruit and veggie boxes that you can get delivered as well. Like they probably
Yeah.
will have onion in them, but just donate that to someone and eat the rest. And they're always seasonal food, so it's benefiting you in two ways.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just looking at, before we finish any of these last comments, someone was talking about garlic powder and onion powder as a good substitutes. I find they're a bit like, some people they work and others they're like really can be a problem. So I think just try them based on what you think works. Mel said, oh my God, fennel is the best. Fennel's getting lots of thumbs ups. I think that's all of our comments. I think someone said earlier about using fermented foods and how much that helped them. Yeah, which is wonderful. It's just something that we would definitely say, depending on where you're at with your gut, was where we might look at how they slot in. But other than that, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think I've talked enough.
It's like, put this sick lady to bed.
Yeah.
No, that was great. I'm surprised, Mickey, you're coming out with some like pearls of wisdom. I think we should like flare up your lymph nodes more.
No. All this water, it's making my brain work properly.
You're so hydrated.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone has any questions, please just let us know in the comments below. You can DM us directly. As I said, it's SIBO month, so we're like hardcore concentrating on this topic. We're going to be doing different topics each month, but pretty much a lot of what we've described, if you head to the JCN Clinic IG page, you're going to be having lots of informative posts there. But yeah, if you've got any specific questions, just DM Mickey, not me. Drown out her inbox. She'll love it. Only kidding. But otherwise, Mickey's gone frozen again. Just as we're trying to sign off.
Next week as well. Is that right? With Mel? I don't know what it is yet.
Say that again. It froze you.
I said I think there's another live coming next week with Mel and Carissa as well, if they've figured that out.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we'll be doing lots of lives on this topic. So yeah, just stay tuned. But otherwise, thanks for joining us. And thanks heaps, Mickey. You go and rest up.
I will try.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.